Good afternoon to all who've joined us today for our AGRF session on women and gender lens financing, game-changing solutions to capitalize women's agri-enterprises. We're very pleased to bring you this discussion, which is part of this year's theme of Africa's pathways towards recovery and food systems transformation. We have a very distinguished group of colleagues who will share their experiences, their ideas, their thoughts of innovations that we should be thinking about when we think about women and gender lens financing. For those of you who are Francophone, please note that we do have interpretation. There's an interpretation button at the bottom of your screen, so we will have French-English interpretation. Unfortunately, those are the two languages that we have for today. Just to set a bit of a scene of why today's discussion is very important. The World Bank and others have noted that 60 to 80% of the workforce in agriculture in Africa is comprised of women. But yet, the Montpellier organization, very well noted, have noted that only 7% of extension services go to women. Women only own 1% of arable land for agriculture, and women only have 1% of access to credit. And so this huge imbalance, it's almost like when you talk about food security, trying to battle with one arm behind your back, meaning that women have been almost excluded when one talks about access to finance. In the last 5-10 years, though, there's been a greater clarion call for looking at investment and finance in Africa, particularly in agriculture, through a gender lens. And so we have today really experts and longtime practitioners in this area to share with you their thoughts about this subject, particularly different initiatives that they're involved with, and their thoughts about what might be needed in the future. We have Ms. Ndaya Beltchika, who is IFAD's lead technical specialist on gender and social inclusion, Mr. Philip Digo, who from WFI, AU Decade of Financing for Women in Agriculture, Elizabeth Christopher Swai, who's the MD of AKM Glitters Company Limited, Jessica Espinoza, who's the chair of 2x Challenge, 2x Collaborative Vice President of DG and KFW, Hillary Barry, who's the CEO of Lady AGRI, and Bettina Prato, Senior Coordinator, Smallholder in Agri, SME Finance and Investment Network. As we have a large panel, and I want to make sure that everybody gets to share their thoughts on this, and I have some specific questions that I'd like to pose to each one of you. I actually would like to take 1 minute for each of you to just share your preliminary thoughts about this subject of women and gender lens financing. The question that I have is, do you think that we are moving in the right direction? Is there more of a gender lens? Or do you think that we have a long way to go? And I would like to start with Ndaya. If you could just share your thoughts. 1 minute, we'll do a quick round robin, and then I'll get into some of the questions that I have for you each specifically.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well. Thank you for this introduction and for the very sobering statistics that actually you did share. So I'm very happy and pleased to be here. Are we in the good direction? I would say we are making progress, as you just mentioned, over the past decade. Effort has been made to focus increasingly on gender lens financing, or to improve the gender consideration when we do gender financing. But I would say there is still a long way to go when we look at some of the statistics. And also we need to find a way to, when we make some commitments, to have some accountability and some mechanism that would enable us to track our progress. So I will leave it at that to get started. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving quickly, Philip, what are your thoughts on where we are?
Thank you so much, Michael, and of course, AGRI for having us in this call. I think we need to accelerate. The point, we are at a place where, unfortunately, we haven't done enough. And even when we think we're doing enough, we have external forces like technology innovation, climate change, that are simply clawing back even the gains that women made. The other piece, of course, is I think as much as we're talking about gender lens financing, we need to introduce new concepts which we are not using at the moment, whether it's and what we're looking at the AU decade is meaningful, dignified, and resilient. Others will be doing, we will be in a circle, and our sense is that we need something different.
Okay, so we need more. And I hope you'll talk about some of the things that we could use. Elizabeth, could you share your thoughts on this, please?
I think as an entrepreneur and coming from the low background, I think yes, there's very good progress that is going on, but there's a lot more to be done. Probably we should look at the analysis of what exactly women need to to be developed on, rather than looking at the gaps that are normally being discussed during various meetings or discussions. The gaps that we normally know usually, on my understanding, I feel like there's a lot more into women themselves, women development in terms of skills of investment and financing, and which is a very huge subject for us to look at. So for me, yes, there's a progress, and there's also progress on personal development in terms of women understanding financing world. But yes, there is still more because the levels are different. So thank you.
No, thank you very much. That's a very important perspective from someone who is receiving funding. Now I'd like to turn to someone who has been providing funding. Jessica, what are your thoughts?
I can definitely echo what the other panelists have mentioned. There's still a long way to go, and we see it in the statistics. And from my experience, we've made amazing achievements in the broader space of gender lens investing. I would say globally, gender as a lens to investment is now increasingly mainstreamed across the entire spectrum of investors. We see it in emerging markets, in developed markets, really everywhere. And that's a great thing. And testimony to is the fact that just the development finance institutions alone have committed and mobilized more than $11 billion of capital towards gender smart investments in the last 3 years. At the same time, I think there are still major gaps, especially when it comes to women's empowerment in the agri value chains globally. If we think about SME business, there have been a lot of initiatives focusing on women entrepreneurs and access to finance, but these have often not addressed the specific hurdles that women in agriculture face. So I think there are still a lot of untapped opportunities to bring gender lens investing towards the agriculture space, to look at women agri-entrepreneurs, and also the overall way in which agri-businesses and entire value chains can be more gender smart.
Okay, no, that's I think quite useful. What I want to come back to you on when we come back around are those hurdles, because I think sometimes we don't often understand that it's not a level playing field at this juncture. Hillary, I want to bring you in because you also and your organization, Lady Agri, focus on this area kind of 24/7. This is the focus area. How do you feel that the last years have evolved and where we are? Are things improving? Are they stagnating? Is there a lot of lip service? but not a lot of action. What do you think?
Thanks so much, Michael. Just in your introduction there, you're giving me a lot of ammunition, if I could say that. I remember when we started out in Lady Agri 2018, some really interesting conversations with Bettina in Rome. It's the whole reason we set up Lady Agri. We could see that there was a big move on investment. Agriculture certainly became trendy again from the investment side of things. But there seemed to be very few dollars or a few euros coming from that 11 billion into the agri business investment space where women are actually active. And I'd just like to anchor what I'm saying in the whole over theme of this discussions. We're talking about food systems, we're talking about sustainability. We're coming out of a year of pandemic. What that has shown, Michael, is that prior to the pandemic, when Lady Agri spoke about women-led agri SMEs, we were often told by the banks and the DFIs and investors, oh, they're on the smaller ticket size, not really interesting enough to entice the investment officers to open up the file and take a deeper look. And what the pandemic has shown us is that it's actually women with imports down. Basically, it created a market and a space for women-led agri SMEs working in the food space to kind of shine. And now moving forward, I think that definitely there's a stronger argument there, again, from the food system point of view, to start investing into those agri SMEs which are working on the local and regional market within the African Free Trade Agreement. Lady Agri is about boots on the ground and mud on our face. And I think when you get granular and you actually see the issues, lack of access to digital, lack of connection, logistics. I think I did 2,500 kilometers last week alone in Cameroon. When you go out there, you're actually up against the real issues. And so great to be on this panel today, because I think those around the table are very much committed to moving the dial on those real issues. So thank you.
I think what is very interesting about what you're saying is that there are some other contributing factors, logistics, support, where women are and where the markets are, that also the need for aggregation in the eyes of financiers to get the ticket size of the financial disbursements larger. Bettina, I won't say you're wearing two hats, but you have two perspectives that you're bringing to us today. So I'd love for you to share your thoughts on this. And I know SAFIN works with smallholders and the agri-SME finance space, but give us your take on where we are in this area of, I'll say, implementing and realizing the gender lens financing, not just talking about it.
Thank you, Michael. Well, I want to echo what was said before I spoke, because it's hard to disagree with the important points that have been made. I think we are, generally speaking, seeing progress in terms of awareness. So certainly greater sense of awareness of the importance of gender lens financing, and or addressing at least that component that relates to improving access to finance for women as entrepreneurs, but also strengthening women's capacity as financial investors. So, women's presence in on the supply side of finance for women in food. Where we see less progress is, I think, around actually operationalizing this, making this tangible, sort of understanding what sort of processes you need to have in place as an investor, as a financial service provider, to really be able to target, track, monitor, report against the gender-related impact of your portfolio. This is really not an easy process to go through for many institutions that are not necessarily well equipped to do that, or don't have a lot of capabilities to invest in transforming their internal processes, their culture as well. Where I see also mixed progress is around the demand side of finance. The entrepreneur in the panel pointed to this as being very important. I think that what I've heard in the past months, in my capacity also as vice chair of the Champions Network for the Food System Summit for Gender, has been very much this need to also strengthen the capabilities of women as entrepreneurs to be able to access finance, their own bankability, sort of their capacity to develop viable business propositions, and their capacity to operate within the very constraining environment, socially, policy related, institutional, in which they operate. So this goes back to the points that were made about the bigger picture, that needs to be addressed for access to finance to really be meaningful and to have an impact on women's economic empowerment. And there, I think we're really lagging behind the progress we're making in terms of awareness raising among financial institutions, and also the women's capacity to develop bankable propositions, business models, etc. On the one hand, you see a lot of innovation, very exciting women entrepreneurs speaking also on fora related to the AGRI in the past couple of years. On the other hand, you see also the ecosystem of business supporting organizations really struggling to keep up with that, and so the offering on the demand side of finance is not really where it needs to be right now. Over.
I think those are very helpful in terms of our overall understanding of this, insights to add. And you bring me to really wanting to pull in Ndaya and Philip now, because we're, to some degree, as a panel, as moderator, familiar with the term. So we dive in and we have a conversation that is kind of wonkish in the sense of, okay, I know these things, but for those joining us who may not be as clear as what is meant by gender lens investment and gender lens finance, I'm hoping that both Ndaya and Philip, you can give us your take on kind of what is the background around gender lens financing, the landscape, who are some of the key actors in this space, what are some of the practices that we're trying to get the financial community and the stakeholders, the ecosystem to provide some of the opportunities and some of the gaps. I think that will add to the richness of the conversations we've had so far by giving it context for those who may not, kind of jump between the different terms that we've used. So, Philip, I'll start with you, and then I'll ask Ndaya to do that, to give your kind of paint the ecosystem a little bit for us.
I think from our take and from the work that I'm doing with the Africa Union, but also just locally here, being, let me just say, fortunate to be the chair of something called Joyful Women, which is a 12-year initiative. It's really about how do you ensure that finance, or financial institutions, or financial instruments, including policies, work for women. We know that for the longest time, patriarchy, in the sense of the word and in the world that we exist, have always kind of disproportionately or disfavors women, especially around the issues of economics. Right from the Beijing Platform for Action, right through Beijing +5, right through the SDGs, we see this sprinkling of terms around economic empowerment, financial inclusion, but basically institutions and policies have not necessarily been responsive to this idea that women are, by the very nature of how the world is organized, disenfranchised or disproportionately affected by how these institutions respond to their challenges. Women do not own factors of production. They do not necessarily, how do I say it, in many ways have the kind of assets that men have, and therefore we need financial instruments that recognizes this disadvantage, but also in a way recognizes the strength, and that's really our context, that women have strengths. There's a way that women, how do I say, have a relationship with money that the current formal systems don't necessarily understand. And so from where I sit, this is what we're looking at. The group that I'm the chair, for example, women put money on the table. Over time, they have social capital over this money. they've been able over 12 years to curate about $12 million. And that's just the money. But in terms of how they deal with money, the sort of psychosocial support, the sort of interest rates that they pass are very much incrementally benefiting the women and not necessarily seen as profit that goes to a certain institution. So basically for me, that's really the context that we see, but the formal systems do not recognize the credit worthy, for example, of these women who for 12 years have actually put kids to school, grown businesses, have been very much inclusive, have very much done stuff that I'm actually jealous as a person who has a job. I cannot believe that these women have been able to do it across, cascading right from national level, right down to grassroots. So my sense and our context will be, how do we ensure that we have a system that recognizes and valorizes that capability and therefore does not necessarily create bottlenecks, but leverages and understands this and just empowers and facilitates on how women then can grow their businesses. Over.
Nadia, I want to, before commenting on Philip's thoughts, I just wanted to go straight to you because I'm still trying to make sure that our audience has a good sense of who, when you talk about gender finance and gender lens financing, who are we pushing? Is it commercial banks? Is it development finance institutions? Is it SACCOs? All of the above? And a number of panelists have mentioned that finance is a part of it, but access to market is also key. Access to infrastructure is also key. Technical support and business development, entrepreneurship support, access to networks is also key. So Nadia, what are your, I guess, additions to Philip's comments for us?
Thank you very much, Michael. Exactly to the point that you made, when we, at least at IFAD, when we are talking about gender lens financing, is really to take on board the gender consideration and the gender data to inform any kind of investment or decision-making process as we are embarking into the design of a project in priorities or to respond to the priorities of the government. And so when we are talking about what are the gender consideration that we have to take on board, or the data, is really to understand what are the needs and priorities, not only based on the financial needs, but also in terms of the activities as you would like to do, what are some of the challenges, what are some of the training that are required. And so having a holistic understanding of what is the gap between men and women, or even broadly speaking, social inclusion, enables us to really understand what are some of the challenges. So now when we talk about the type of institutions, so we are looking at formal finance, informal finance, SACCO, different groups. So we have a different spectrum or different type of services when we look at the type of needs that can be provided or at least addressed by that. So IFAD, for instance, when we did recently a stock take, when we look at all of the investments that we have done, we had about 240 or so. And the stock take was really to understand what would make a difference and what was important to make the project successful by addressing the different constraints. And when we talk about the constraints or the gender gap, we're looking at 3 different pathways. One, of course, is the economic empowerment. The other one that we look at is representation and leadership. And then the third one is equal distribution of a workload, as well as equal distribution of social economic benefits. And what we saw was that for the project that actually truly fully addressed, and that from the beginning, when they did a situation analysis to actually understand the full context, that actually targeted the people carefully and understanding what were the needs and the priorities, they were able to actually develop activities that were very clearly linked to the priorities of the group. For instance, there was a project in Uganda where, based on the understanding of the communities and the participants, not only did they receive targeted literacy training, but they also receive business services development. They get access to technologies, and the size of the loans were also adequate so that they could not only do investment in inputs, but also for capital. And then because of that, they were able to access the right technologies. So now they could also take advantage of the larger opportunities, get access to market. So when we look holistically, when we talk about gender lens financing or investing, it's not just finance. We also look at increasing the capability of the different groups. We look also at investing in the monitoring and reporting, investing in different mechanisms, and to do that at different levels, whether it's at the household, the communities, national and globally as well. Over to you.
No, thank you. I appreciate that expanded definition, so to speak, because when you think of gender lens financing, if you're just reading it, sometimes you may just think this is all on the financier, it's on the bank. And they're the only ones who need to change how they're thinking and acting. But there's an ecosystem that makes this come alive and be realized. Jessica, your institution is kind of at the cold front of good practice of mobilizing capital and trying to put it to work. What are some of the I'll say, impediments to, putting that 11 billion, kind of getting it downstream? Because some of our colleagues have said, well, we're not 100% sure if it's there and it's on paper and they might have done a press release, but at the coal face, we have some of the issues. How do you see it? And when you engage with financiers who are down lending, are there challenges that they mention to you about, if I had a little more data, if I had bigger projects, if I had a project developer who had a little more technical assistance, I could do more. Give us your thoughts on that.
So I think this is quite a complex question, and there are several aspects to it. First of all, when we launched 2X Challenge and we developed the criteria, we consciously looked at the entire value chain and opportunities to make a business gender smart. And that is what Ndaya has just mentioned. So it's not only looking at women as entrepreneurs, although of course that is a very important focus, but it's also looking at the gender composition of senior management, of the board of directors, who actually holds decision-making power in the organization, where do women participate among the workforce, and then what are the products and services that are offered? Are they designed with a gender lens? Are they also gender smart for the consumers? And where do women participate in the supply chain as well? So a lot of different opportunities there. The other aspect of gender lens investing and of the 2X Challenge was to say we take the existing business model or the focus of the investors as a starting point, and we identify opportunities to make them gender smart. I think a main challenge there is that traditionally a lot of investors and also financial intermediaries haven't necessarily focused on the agricultural sector because it has often been perceived as high risk. And if they did focus on it, then it was often on very large businesses, often also businesses that actually come from, say, from Europe and invest in emerging markets, or existing family businesses, but that are, kind of a minority on the continent. They haven't necessarily looked at SMEs in the agriculture space. So I think that is a key barrier. But then even if you focus on agriculture, we know that women play a major role and do the bulk of the work in agri value chains, but they are often not the ones that own the land and that hold the actual decision-making power. And so because of this and these unequal power dynamics in the sector, women are also often invisible in the agricultural sector. And Hillary pointed to this stereotype that there's often this perception that female farmers, they're just kind of in subsistence agriculture and are too small to be able to access financing. So I think that is also a key barrier. There's also very interesting data on gender bias in kind of resource allocation. And the FAO, for example, found that if female farmers had the same access to agricultural inputs, yields on farms would be 20 to 30% higher, and this would lift 100 to 150 million people out of hunger. But because of these barriers and also this gender bias, it actually leads to a situation where farms from men are over-fertilized and over-invested in, whereas female farmers don't have the same kind of yields because they don't have the same kind of access to inputs. Now, from the access to finance perspective, and to your question about the financial intermediaries, women in agriculture face these additional barriers, but this comes on top to the challenges that actually all SMEs in agriculture face, because the sector, as I mentioned, has been traditionally underinvested in and perceived as high risk. And then this is further compounded by the fact that women often don't hold the land title, so they don't have that land to provide traditional collateral that banks require if they lend to agricultural businesses. Now, on the positive side, something that we've seen relatively recently is that there are pioneering banks, and it's interesting that they are especially visible in Africa, who have developed new financing models. So they use alternative collateral, for example, inventory or jewelry instead of land titles. Or some of them have also tested new solutions that don't require collateral at all. So they leverage, for example, digital technology to determine the repayment capacity and allow women to build a credit history. And I think this is very interesting. And finally, I would add that in the 2X Challenge, we're exploring with Hillary and Lady AGRI and other initiatives in this space, where can we bring these partners together and provide financing solutions that work? So how can we make these opportunities visible and channel more capital to them? Because I think this lack of visibility, lack of data, and kind of making this opportunity visible has perpetuated the problem in the past.
No, thank you. I think that you shared some of the innovations, and that's really what I wanted to ask Hillary a bit about. I mean, we've issue spotted and kind of named lots of the challenges and the problems, but I like the fact that you're saying that there are financiers who are using alternative collateral that women have more access to, or not using collateral per se at all, using digital technology to come up with a credit score of a sort to make a determination. Hillary, what are your thoughts about how the market is trying, for what's good practice and who's doing some innovative things, and what might be some of the trends in addition to what Jessica mentioned that you see?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, I think to continue from what Jessica said, it's interesting to see how some of the local banks are now actually taking an interest as well in terms of internal investment in setting up what we call an AGRI desk. So I think a lot of the times in the past, when you actually took your courage and your business plan and you went through the door, sometimes there was kind of a cold reception on the other side. And now banks, some of the partners that we're working with, like EcoBank has just brought out their L Invest program. We're partnered with Cofina across 8 different countries. They're taking a look from the agri value chain perspective. Obviously, banks aren't charities. They need to make money and they need to make sure that people can actually pay back. But they're taking a deeper dive on how the actual agri-value chains work. And then where Lady AGRI is coming in is getting these banks to become more gender smart. So going beyond the gender lens, but actually smart. Because if we look in the past, I mean, women are the best savers. You look at the women's savings groups for years and years, they've proven as these are women's tools that they develop themselves to actually get over the obstacle of not having access to formal finance. And they're extremely successful. An issue I would like to bring to the table today, again from some of our recent missions, is that we really need to build women's trust in the financial system. We need to build up women SMEs trust, women in cooperatives trust, so that they're actually willing to go to the formal financial sector, that they're willing to actually take out a loan, that they're willing to invest beyond their own comfort zone. And it's only with that investment that we're actually going to build up resilience in these agri-businesses and resilience in these agri-supply chains. So I think there's still a lot to be done on the trust issue. And what Lady AGRI is doing is that we work with our women SME clusters. We work with clusters of women in cooperatives, and we work in accompanying them to bankability. And at the same time, we're working in partnership with the banks who've shown an interest to invest in the same clientele as such. So definitely there is moves there. And it's all about translating, as you said, what's out in the press releases and what's out in the large financial commitments, and really getting granular about it. What's the interest rate? How much do I need to pay back every month? What as a group can we commit to? Is there enough solidarity in that group to actually take on a group loan to actually grow the business?
Oh, thank you. I am drawn to a conversation that I had with a colleague in Kenya who told me about a emerging WhatsApp group of women financiers. And I wanted, you talk about the being comfortable going to the financier aspect of it. And sometimes it's easier perhaps for a woman to approach another woman if the woman is in a position of authority at a financial institution. And so I wanted to ask Bettina about on the supply side of the funding. Are there growth in funds? How are the financial institutions themselves in putting women in positions of decision-making in terms of credit policy, et cetera? Are we seeing progress there? Because ostensibly, if each country on the continent had, I'll say a plethora, but a group of women-led financial institutions, that might also accelerate the disbursement of capital to women-led businesses. Just curious about your thoughts on that, Bettina, and what you might see in the marketplace.
So thank you, Michael. This is a hugely important point. I curated a dialogue with a number of women entrepreneurs and women investors in relation to the Food System Summit early in April, where we discussed what could be some of the key game changers in the space to really accelerate access to finance for women-led SMEs. And getting more women in finance was one of the key recommendations that came from them, both the investors and the entrepreneurs, because of this, easier sort of rapport that sometimes can be established, between women on the lending side and or the investing side and on the investment, sort of reception side. Am I seeing a lot more of that? Honestly, I think that's a space where we need to progress a lot more than we do in the entrepreneurship space. I see a lot more visible women entrepreneurs coming, into the pipeline of just mainstream investors in this business than I see women-led funds, for example. There are a lot of women investment officers that work, in the SME, agri-SME, food SME space, both local and international, investment vehicles with significant representation of women staffing their portfolio processes. But really not enough women leadership in finance. In this case, we're talking about Africa, the sector. Yes, we do have a few selected, also well known figures. Sometimes when you organize an event on this topic, you always end up inviting the same people. And so I think there's a lot of room to be a lot of space to be distance to be covered there, to have more women also in positions in the business that allow them to be innovators. So we discussed a couple of years ago in another AGRI session about the importance of having more students in business schools or in finance, getting MBAs or studying finance in higher education, being exposed to opportunities in agriculture, so that they come into the financial sector, sort of having this kind of taste and appreciation for the opportunities in the sector. Now, gender needs to be addressed in relation to that agenda as well. So I'd like to see more, although the examples of women that we have leading in finance in relation to food and agriculture are sometimes really, really inspiring, and you know, setting an example that others are following. But many more women need to come into this business.
No, thank you. I always find that these type of engagements stimulate thoughts, and the thought that you gave me was for a directory of women, you know, kind of women-owned financial institutions, or institutions that are leading the way in terms of funding women's business. A lot of the questions in our chat and the comments are really around where do we find capital? And I want everybody to just think a little bit, because I'll come back to you to ask you where for resources for people to go further in this area, to study more, to understand more. Where would they go? Where could they go? But before I do that, because we've had all of you as kind of experts on the not so much on the, purely on the supply side, but I want to get Elizabeth back in here because she's the entrepreneur, and you know, her experience at the coalface of being a woman in business and agriculture on the continent is also critical, because often there's not enough opportunities for the entrepreneur to actually speak truth to power, so to speak, to those who can influence what happens in the broader financial ecosystem. So Elizabeth, I'd like to get your thoughts on, you know, what are some of the challenges that you find in your country? Do you see change happening? One of the questions that in the chat was, whose responsibility is it? Has government really come to bear to push for this, or is it development partners that are pushing for more gender lens, or is it the financial institutions themselves? And are they making progress or at a fast enough pace? So it's a lot of things to think about, but we need to hear from you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've heard the experts talking about financing with women, but I feel like emerging from being a very small entrepreneur, I've faced a lot of different challenges in different levels. So the challenges that I'm facing now are not exactly the same challenges that I faced when I was a small, or when I was, you know, moving from small to medium company. First of all, one thing that I would like to speak about the government of Tanzania, for example. The government is responding. It has been responding at the district level. I think the government has a policy of 5% of the income of the district to assign to women and youth. But the 5% is too small, is too little, you know, to meet all the needs of smallholder or startup entrepreneurs as women. But at least it's trying. As for agribusiness, this is in relation with the COVID status. The government of Tanzania has issued a 10% interest or lower to the banks to offer these rates to you know, to agribusinesses. And the bank that will offer lower rates other than 10, 8, that means the government of Tanzania will offer capital to that bank at 3%. So at least the government is acting on some of the issues. But again, we also are struggling with the business environment, the policies, the procedures, and all the cost that is involved in the business related policies. And there are so many procedures that also bear some cost that makes you know, cost of production to go very high. But again, in Tanzania, the government is also open to discuss this. They're trying to remove some of the fees, but still we are at that process of meeting in the middle. So the business people are struggling to meet in the middle, and the government is struggling to meet in the middle to make these policies, to review these policies. Now, when I'm talking about financing, the accessibility of financing and the challenges that women have, I will speak first of all the basics. All financial institutions has principles and policies that may not be bent, because it's a policy and it has to go to align with the needs of the woman when they are presenting. The question is, do these women understand that these are financial policies? I mean, the financial principles. Do they understand? Do they understand the processes to access the financing? So when you are talking, I'm also learning at this level, when you're talking about investment ready, are they ready for investment? What type of you know, what is the size of that investment? Are they ready? Do they know what is the process? How long that process will take? For example, if you are to go to investors, the real investors, the process may even take a year or 2 years. It depends with how that woman is ready. The documentation, the you know, preparation of the due diligence of that business. Is it a formal business? If it's a formal business, do they have records in place? If they don't have records in place, what should be done? I do understand donor partners are offering technical assistances, which they are very good because they are preparing the mindset of that woman towards that investment. They are also providing other technical support for that woman to prepare the package for investment, so that when the investors come, that woman is ready and understanding investor language. Because if you don't understand the investor language, how are you going to defend yourself? But then when you're looking at a woman as a woman and the nature of a woman, somehow women do not have the skills for negotiations. And negotiations will need that woman to hire consultants, which are very expensive. For example, for during the preparation of fundraising material, like information memorandum, if you have to prepare teasers, you have to prepare strategic plans, business plans, financial models. All these are technical expertise that a woman would need, whether you're small, whether you're medium, or whether you're jumping to another level. Because probably an entrepreneur do not have financial knowledge, do not have financial education. So the technology as well, because at the moment you're told, okay, you have to prepare a data room so that financiers should access your information. But do all women know what is a data room, how to prepare a data room, how does it work? So there are a lot of skills that are missing. So at the end of the day, we are looking at these big things. We are looking at collaterals. We are looking at documentations. I think those has some options. For example, for collateral for agriculture, we can use their crops as a collateral. We can introduce some models that women can use their harvests as collateral. But when you're talking about these technical skills, you're talking about a person who is conversant with the financial models. These are very expensive. And for women from all levels, it's very difficult for them to access this. But again, as women, they also face a lot of other gender issues. When they go to the banks, for example, or whether they access some other money, you know, they are faced with these situations where probably men are, you know, and I'm sorry for this, I don't mean all men, but at least this we are facing men asking for for sexual favors so that you can access finance. Or when you access finance, then you have to be, you have to establish a certain relationship with a certain guy at a certain organization so that you're comfortable. Now, these are the things that pushes women behind. These are the things that affect women comfortability and the comfort of them, or maybe not only comfort them, probably it's a way they lack the confidence to negotiate comfortably without being held with all these issues, small issues, because somehow they are also affecting the the perception of a man against women, because women, when we go through this, we get so frustrated emotionally. So there are so many things that we can do. We understand and we think AGRI and African Management Institute, they're now doing this leadership course. And there are also some other services that we get from AGRI, whereas we are trained by investors, angel investors. They train how we should plan, how we should put our systems. We know that there are other programs like providing technical assistance where we identify gaps in our investments, we identify systems to address those gaps. So these are very tedious activities for a woman to go through without having the knowledge or right information, or even accessibility of right investor information. So these are the main gaps that I would think that need to be addressed. And then the other gaps that goes along with the application itself, that one can be sorted during the discussions. So for me, I feel like women need to be prepared. Women should not face a situation as a new situation. They need to be prepared. They need to understand what is the process. They have to understand what are the systems that investors would want to see in the company. They will need to see what status of financial statements they will need to see, what quality of business plans or strategic plans or financial models they would want to see, or how should be the pitch document should be. So those are the things that will allow women to understand investor language, and they will use those skills to defend their application or any type of partnership that they are planning to have with the investors or any type of financiers. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And I wanted you to naturally come to your own conclusion and the end there, because I think that far often in this space, the financiers talk about the problems and challenges that women have, and the entrepreneurs might not even be on the panel. And so I think that your inputs resonated with a lot of people. I saw a number of comments come up. I almost feel that we've been shortchanged by AGRI to ask us with such a dynamic panel to have this discussion in 60 minutes. And there's so much more that can be talked about. I wanted to, because one of the things that I got from your comments, Elizabeth, was the need for assistance to help women prepare when they go to the financial institutions. I would almost argue that there's also a need for assistance for the financial institutions to be able to work with women. But I wanted to ask Sabdiyo Dido, who is with us, but not on screen, if she could just say a word about Value for Her, because I know Value for Her, which is now an AGRI program, actually tries to provide and has been providing over the last year a lot of this type of assistance and support. Sabdiyo, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. And thank you so much. And it's really very, very gratifying to hear the panelists, shaping giving the picture, laying out the picture for how financing is for women, both on the supply side, on the demand side, and of course the ecosystem side. Is really very, very, very good. So we actually, as AGRI, we intervene in that space through Value for Her. And again, Value for Her is AGRI's continental initiative that is aimed at increasing profitability, growth, and entrepreneurship of women in agriculture on the continent. And the Value for Her is powered by a platform called Value for Her Connect. So it's a digital platform that connects women entrepreneurs women agripreneurs from across the continent so that they can network, they can connect, they can access information, they can develop business networks, they can consolidate their voices and really use their collective capital to shape the business environment. So this is a market, this is an institute, it's basically like a market shaping platform that is supposed to bridge these gaps that we have just described. And it's gaps around access to information, market information, trade information. It is around access to finance, and it is around access to markets. It's around access to know-how. I mean, one I'm really listening to the last speaker. She from her entrepreneurship experience, she's describing the capability issues on the supply side. In this case, we're talking about women entrepreneurs themselves as actors, within this space, and financing institutions, of course, coming in with the financing products. So this is so access to finance, access to know-how, and we also have another pillar that is around access to technology. So Value for Her is attempting to shape this market environment for women in agribusiness through these different streams of services. Again, I have to say that these services are under development. So you probably have seen us a lot on the networking side and really amplifying women's voices in agriculture. So we've had series of webinars and engagements around women entrepreneurship, women in agricultural markets, women in agricultural trade. We've had series of engagements there. And of course, we are slowly building out all the other different pillars that is going to really influence this space and bridge this gap that has been identified, a series of gaps that have been identified as constraining women and market integration and women's success in agri-entrepreneurship. So Michael, for now, maybe that is all I can say, and hand back to you.
That is perfect. Thank you very much. And I really want to apologize to the panelists and to our audience because I've been told that we are out of time. So I wanted to say very much a big thank you to all of our panelists, Ndaya Beltchika, Philip Thigo. Philip, sorry that we didn't get more of the male voice in there, but the ladies really had a lot to say. So it's on me. Elizabeth, thank you so much. Christopher Swai, Jessica Espinoza, Hilary Bowling, and Bettina Prato. Thank you all so much for your inputs and counsel and ideas. And I think to the team from AGRI, you can see that there's a lot more to discuss about this. So I hope that you'll have this group and others back to continue this very important discussion. And on behalf of everybody, thank you very much for this great session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, everybody.